So, HomeAdvisor, local services, we have
Right.
a lot of stuff to touch on. So you joined HomeAdvisor 5 years ago?
2011, early 2011.
2011.
Yeah.
You know, that's when we launched Street Fight that same year.
Good year.
It was a good year. It was a very good year. So, and you had come from the online dating space.
I'd been in Match for a long time, worked at Blockbuster Online, been in some marketplaces, so came
Yep.
back into the IEC family and took over.
Okay, so, and I want to come back to some of that in a second. But I want to speak, if you could sort of just tell everyone a little about HomeAdvisor,
Sure.
just so we could sort of, clarify the edges of the space.
Sure, what is HomeAdvisor? So essentially, we are the world's #1 marketplace for home services. So if you are a homeowner, you need help with repair, maintenance, improvement, you come to HomeAdvisor, we will get you screened and approved, criminal and background checked, screened and approved pros to help you with all of your needs. To give some sense of our size, we'll do roughly $40 billion in project value flowing through our platform this year, 10 to 15 million service requests, and we have the largest network in terms of capacity. So we are the biggest player in the home services marketplace.
Okay, so, and we've seen, so you say that you talk about being the biggest, but
Right.
it's a space that's gotten a little crowded. We've certainly seen a bit of a boom in the last few years with
Sure.
millions of dollars poured in. So what do you see as having driven that interest on the part
Sure.
of
I think you have to look at the space historically and think about what the yellow pages meant, the advent of the internet, and how people thought about local services. And it was essentially, sort of this monolithic, huge thing that you could make a lot of money with. And so, I remember back at IEC, there was City Search. Everybody went at it and went at it. And I think people began to realize that it truly wasn't that monolithic. I mean, it's a very different need to get a spa, a reservation versus a dog walker versus a plumber, et cetera. And so I think people were going at it the wrong way. And I think the advent that really changed things was the smartphone. Suddenly you had this amazing sort of toolbox for your life. And if you're a homeowner, you're going to have the HomeAdvisor app. If you own a dog, you're going to have a dog walking app. And so suddenly it became a much easier way to give people what they really needed. So I think the investment thesis followed. Essentially, it was now a much easier way to go and invest in different parts of the local market. And so I think that was the big change. And certainly at HomeAdvisor, that's what we saw. This advent of the smartphone, suddenly you're a homeowner. We might not be on the first screen, but we're in the second screen. Our service providers are using it as their sort of office on the go. And I think that really changed the space.
So is it more from the consumer side that there was just a bigger potential, I guess, install base, or was it sort of happening on both sides of the market?
Well, I think for us, it happened certainly both sides of the market. Service providers getting smartphones meant they were, untethered from their office. They could go out and be more effective. But, I think one of the problems was you thought of local services as this big monolithic thing, but you still would have to go to a City Search or a portal and weed through all the things you don't need. And suddenly now with smartphone, you could have just the apps you need. If you're a mom, you're going to have mom apps, right? If you're a dog owner, you have what you need for that. And so I think that really changed.
And it's
how
not
people
just
invest.
that they can find them, because you can go to Google or anything. It's that
But it's a unique
you have additional
experience.
things, right? And you have reviews. And
Right.
Have you always had reviews built into?
We've always had reviews, but I think your point is a good point, which is to be able to create a very unique experience. I mean, it's hard enough to do repair, maintenance, improvement, 500 different tasks at a geo level. To be a dentist, a dog walker, DJs, spas. I mean, each one of those has its own unique cadence and its own unique experience. And I think, suddenly as you disaggregated everything, you could have that really specific experience that appealed to the person who needed that particular tool for their life.
Yeah. So the when we talked ahead of time, you also talked
Sure.
about the housing recovery as having
Right.
played a role in the explosion of local services.
Yeah, I think that helped us specifically. I think certainly you saw a lot of people pulling back on discretionary spending. I think you saw the housing market really slow everything down. I think the combination of the housing market coming back, smartphone really catching fire, was sort of a nice thing to heat the entire space up. And then the investment just followed through.
Sure. And so now where we're starting to get to is the market's getting a little rocky for some people.
Sure.
Because it has been so crowded. And in the Q&A that you did with our folks on the site last month, you talked about the local services category leaving a lot of corpses in its wake and cautioning other people
Sure.
from getting into this field. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to say don't go into the space. The caution was, at least in home services, it's really, really expensive and it's really hard. And I hear the pitch that a lot of people say, well, I'll get 25, 50 million, $100 million. We'll come in, we'll get all the upside of HomeAdvisor with none of the cost. And the reality is acquisition cost of homeowners is expensive. The cost of service providers is expensive. We've spent $1 billion since our inception on this space. It's really, really difficult.
Sorry, how many?
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
We've invested $1 billion in the company. And so to catch up is really tough. And then you look at sort of our on-demand platform. You look at Instant Connect, Instant Booking, our True Cost Scout, all the things we're doing. It just makes it harder and harder. So I'm not saying stay out of it. I'm just saying come in eyes wide open. That it's expensive and it takes a long time.
Right.
It's not something where you just come in, flip a switch, and it takes off.
Right. Well, there are the operational complexities and costs, and then there's the acquisition costs.
Correct.
What's the breakdown? Like, how much is the focus on acquisition?
Well,
Like, sort of from
we look
expenditures.
Yeah, so we look at everything from our SP acquisition costs to our consumer costs, and then factor it into a lifetime value on both sides. The nice thing about our scale and the investments we've made is you get to see that pay off over time. So we've been investing aggressively, hoping that it would pay off the way it did, and now it's flowing through. So I think you have to take a really long-term view, but if you're going to start out, you better be really ready for the cost of acquisition and to lose money for a period and a good period of time before you get that payback, because those curves are long.
Right. So, do you think how do you think it's going to shake out? Do you expect there will be sort of two market leaders, or there will be HomeAdvisor and then maybe some specialists, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm biased. I like to think we're going to win and win big, but I think it all depends on how you think about the space. From our perspective, if you're a homeowner, you want to go where the best service providers are. If you're a service provider, you want to go where the homeowners are. We frankly want only the best guys. We screen and approve for criminal and financial because we want guys who can pass that test. We have a subscription model because we want guys who have enough money in the bank they're going to be around. We want the best of the best.
And sorry, just the subscription model is on the pros side.
On the pro side. And so we reject 10 to 15% of everybody who tries to come in for criminal and financial background issues, some of them serious. We don't want them. We want them to go someplace else. So if someone else wants to be the sort of low quality, low source provider, God bless them, good for them. That's not what we want to do. So there may be an alternative marketplace to that
For the
degree.
people who don't pass the screening with
Look,
you guys.
If you want the cheap, guy who's not screened, there are places to go find those guys. But
Yeah.
be careful, what they do for you. I think there might be some niches. Sure, there could be somebody that comes in and figures, just one part of our ecosystem. But in the end, do you really want to go to a place for electricians, plumbers, drywallers? We're probably about as deep as you're going to want to go. No different than doctors, right? You don't want to go to a side where you have to get cardiologists versus pediatrician, et cetera. So.
Right, exactly. So the big point here is that you guys have a track record. Well, you're further down the road. You've got a strong.
We've got scale, massive scale.
You've got scale, and you also have mastered the operational complexity, which I know is something that you've talked about a lot, and looking at, you worked in some spaces previously that were complex.
Yes.
And what makes
this one's by far the most complex because you have limited capacity for a service provider. They have only so many hours in a day. You have a homeowner who wants help immediately, and if you can't bring together that supply and demand at that point, you lose. And if you can't monetize it, you lose. And I think that's been the real challenge. I mean, we are a matching platform. We're algorithmically driven. We've been working this algorithm for years. It's very, very difficult to bring those things together. So
that makes sense. So a topic that comes up a lot in this space is lead gen and reviews and recommendations. And they seem to be sort of very hot areas right now with shady elements. So could you talk a little bit about how you're ensuring HomeAdvisor integrity around that?
Sure. I mean, we are a matching platform. We have our on-demand, tools, instant connecting, instant booking. the way I see the space is you had sort of Yellow Pages was phase one, phase two was online reviews and directories. We are much more about matching people instantaneously, figuring out how to bring them together, take the friction away. So, if you're lead gen, that's great. That's kind of a one and done in my mind. We're investing $60 million this year in TV, $80 million in TV next year. What we find is when someone understands our value proposition and sees us on TV, they're a very, very high caliber homeowner and service providers like that. We get lots of repeat usage. So I don't even think of ourselves in the context of sort of that lead gen world. In terms of, you'd asked about reviews as well?
Yeah, and recommendations.
Reviews and recommendations, they're an important part of what we do. I think they are becoming more commoditized. And again, I think the future is much more about sort of matching somebody, taking care of their needs. We have a large number of people who come to us and say, just pick someone. I need a plumber. You figure it out. I don't need a review. Now, for additions, remodels, sure, that still becomes important. But I think we're a closed loop system. It's very hard to game our reviews. Other sites don't have that. And reviews are becoming problematic. How do you maintain the integrity? How do you make sure that they're accurate? And so I think the future is sort of, yes, reviews will be a part of the mix. But if you've built your entire site on a list and reviews, good luck. I think you're going to be left behind.
That's interesting. So, and some of that sort of bad actor behavior, do you think that some of that will go away thanks to consumer trends or technology? I mean, I think you were kind of saying,
I just think the world of arbitrage is getting much more difficult. Mobile is forcing people to do more with less, and I think there was a point in time at which you could have a nice little lead gen business, be one and done and keep it going. I think that's much more difficult. And I think consumer expectations are changing to such a degree that you need to have a really good experience. And if you don't have that experience, if you don't have that depth of tool, if you can't do matching like we do, then you're going to potentially get left behind.
So I want to get back to that 1 billion figure, but in this case, you projected $1 billion in revenue in 5 years.
Right.
And then you said to me the other day that that's very conservative. And, well, maybe you didn't say very. So talk about where that growth will come from.
Sure.
And,
Yes, I think I was asked about a year ago in another interview that, did I think we'd get to be a billion in revenue? And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I think in 3 to 5 years we could get there. I am even more bullish now simply because we are a very SaaS-like predictable business. We've made lots of investments. We believe those investments would pay off in the out years. They are. We're seeing EBITDA flow through. We're seeing growth flow through. So if you just take what we're doing and just flow through, we'll hit that number. Right. And I think what's exciting for us is that that's really just the beginning. It's a $400 billion market, but what's really coming is a lot of people are still word of mouth. 70% of the space is still word of mouth. You turn to friends and family to try to find a plumber, electrician, et cetera. That word of mouth is going to come from offline to online. We'll be in a great position to take advantage of that. The other is millennials. Millennials are starting to buy homes as they get that, as they have that first child, buy that second home, get more discretionary income. We are perfectly poised to suit their needs. On demand, easy to use, frictionless. And so I think those are huge structural trends coming that are in our favor. So when I think of $1 billion, I think I think we'll get them the time frame I laid out, but I think that will, 10 years we'll look back and think of that as a very small number.
And what about consolidation in the marketplace?
Sure.
Will that have a factor? Play a role
I mean,
in
maybe.
that?
I think of all local services, there's going to be more consolidation
more
in some. In home services, maybe the problem is we're having a hard time finding others who've built up enough liquidity in the marketplace to consolidate. They may have one part of it or another part of it, but not enough that makes it interesting. Will there be some consolidation? Possibly. I don't know. I think we are just focused on continuing to grow really rapidly, have the sort of scale so that you bring homeowners in and service providers in. And if there's an opportunity for consolidation, so be it. But that's not part of our focus.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to see if there are some questions out here. Yes, right here. Can you just wait for the mic for a second? Otherwise, our video won't pick it up, and then no one will hear you.
Hi, good afternoon. So I have many questions, but I'll just make my main one.
Sure.
Which is, what is your biggest problem?
I'm sorry, what is
what is your biggest problem in your business?
What is my biggest problem, personally or with the company?
Both, actually.
Personally, I'm impatient. Professionally, I think, my biggest problem was 2011 when I sat down and said, how do I reimagine the company? How do we rebrand it? How do we rebuild both sides of the marketplace, the consumer side and the service professional side? How do we invest in TV and make it work? And then, does it pay out? So, I think in some ways I'm very, very lucky. A lot of my pain and suffering was a few years back when I wasn't sure if it was all gonna work the way it has. At this point, I think the biggest challenge is getting adoption of some of the great tools by service providers. A lot of service providers are still, pen and paper, so they can be more efficient. I think getting homeowners to sort of move from word of mouth and realize your neighbor is not necessarily going to give you a background, screened and approved, rated and reviewed service provider. As a matter of fact, a lot of our surveys show they're more likely to give you somebody that they don't even like themselves just because they want to help you, right? That's the way we are. And so breaking that and getting that to move from offline to online is one of the things we're working on. And then frankly, we spend a lot of time just trying to reduce friction. The number one complaint is homeowner says, I didn't hear from a service provider. Service provider says, I didn't hear from the homeowner. So with our on-demand platform, everything we're doing, it's reducing that friction and getting those people together at that point in time. And I think that really, you solve that problem and you win in a big way.
I think we can do one more. Anyone else? That looks like a hand from Megan.
Hi. Well, you mentioned that you do television, but what do you do for customer, on the customer side acquisition on local? And is that different in different markets?
Yeah, so we're lucky. We have national coverage, and by virtue of being on TV, it's a beautiful model for us. It brings in the homeowners, but it also brings in service providers. Service providers see that you're on TV, see your message, and go where they believe the homeowners are going. And so our ability to be national, a lot of people don't realize, when you can advertise nationally, it's much more efficient than doing it at a local level. Local tends to be much more expensive for TV. So we have this beautiful ecosystem where we can be national, we bring the homeowners in, the service providers follow, and frankly, you get really highly qualified homeowners because they understand your value proposition. They're hand raisers, and they're ready to come in and get a project done. So it's hard to spend on TV. You can lose a lot of money really quickly. To be able to spend at 60, 80, 100 million, which is where I think we're going, gives us a really distinct advantage.
Okay. Well, Chris, thank you so
Thank you. I
much.
appreciate
Thank you,
it.
everyone.